What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and today I'll be answering the question, what the hell happened to Reynard? This is a question that needed to be answered as part of the American Open Wheel Racing History series that I've been working on this channel, but I figured it should probably get its own episode. They were the dominant constructor in the late 90s in kart. They were tied to factory programs for Panoz, Chrysler, as well as working on the BAR Formula One team while selling customer sports cars at the same time. Yet by 2002, they were bankrupt, disappearing nearly as quickly as their cars tended to go. For our purposes, we're going to start at the early 1990s. At this point, Reynard had already built its reputation up in Formula Ford and Formula 3 and Formula 3000, and were actually looking to make the jump to Formula 1. They had designed a car, and long story short, apparently they couldn't find an engine to put in the back of the thing, which obviously that's kind of a big deal, so therefore they couldn't race. Everything just kind of fell apart right towards the end after a lot of money had been spent. Obviously, if a lot of money was spent, a lot of money has to be paid, so they needed to find a way to pay that off. Looking to find a good way to make a bunch of money as a race car constructor, they looked to North America to capture the market that was available in kart. Success in kart would, in theory, mean a lot of money. Let's put it this way. For 2002, when they eventually went bankrupt, we'll talk about that a little bit later on, they were planning on building 50 champ cars for that one season alone. It's just the way things work. There was a lot of teams back in the 90s buying champ car chassis, as well as the fact that it was very easy to end up writing one off, because obviously when you're going 235 miles an hour and you crash, there's probably going to be a chassis damage, pretty significant, and that's going to mean they're going to need a new car. So it's actually an incredibly lucrative market if they could make it work. For 1994, Reynard would produce a chassis eligible for kart. Reynard found a team owner who was willing to go with a new and entirely unproven chassis, Chip Ganassi. This would lead to more sales of their 1994 car, mostly to smaller teams at that time, and that car ended up winning on debut in Surfer's Paradise. Obviously, that's a very, very good thing. While 1994 was a Penske steamroller year in kart, the Reynard chassis would win twice compared to the Lola's one victory all year. With the Penske chassis not being available to customers, Reynard had shifted the balance in their favor from Lola. Success was had, and the Reynard chassis would dominate the series from 1995 through 2001. On top of this, new successes brought new opportunities. The dominant Viper GTSR that Orca made famous, Reynard built the chassis. That Panoz GTR1 front-engine, goofy-looking Batmobile thing, guess who designed it? You want some touring cars? They built a Dodge Stratus touring car for the North American Touring Car Championship, because that was a thing at one point apparently, and a BTCC Ford Mondeo. So you had domination in kart, factory-backed programs that were running well. Things were going about as good as they possibly could for a race car constructor by the late 90s. And then it comes full circle. Formula One and BAR to arrive on the grid for the 1999 season. Craig Pollock brought it all together. Jacques Villeneuve would be the driver. 1995 kart champion, and a Reynard, by the way, would be the number one driver. British American Tobacco would bring the money. Reynard would make the chassis. In theory, and given Reynard's history, they should have been competitive right out of the box, leading to some ridiculous statements from Craig Pollock in particular before they even turned a wheel in Formula One. The 1999 BAR would score no points. It was best remembered for its love it or leave it zipper livery. The whole thing was an embarrassment, even the paint job that they put on the car. They'd have another crack at it for 2000, and while they did slightly better, finishing fourth in the Constructors' Championship this time around, it was hardly amazing, and that would basically end up being the story of BAR as a whole. It was sort of there somewhere. That same year, Reynard also got in the sports car business with their 2KQ sports car chassis, designed to fit in both the LMP 900, basically LMP 1 today, and the LMP 675, basically LMP 2 today, class depending on which engine was being used. Out of the box, it was clear early on the car needed further development, and while it would eventually become a competitive class winning car, especially in the 675 class, It was only after upgrades that the car started to reach its potential. Chrysler, who had actually fielded an LMP 900 2KQ Mopar V8 powered LMP, let that sink in for a moment, actually ran the Reynard chassis through Orica. This wasn't really a success at all. It's just mostly remembered because of, holy crap, they put an American V8 in the back of a prototype because of reasons. Hallelujah, that's awesome. But instead, for 2001, Chrysler would take their money to AOWR, who would build them a brand new LMP 900 car. While sports cars should have been a good way to diversify their offerings and help ensure that they were a stable company, it was hardly a license to print money as the car operation had become. Again, may I remind you, in 2002, when they went bankrupt, they were planning on building 50 Champ cars. They would end up building 9 of the LMPs. That's a big difference. So what it really comes down to, as you can probably figure out, was kart. For 2000, the Reynard ranks lost 2 key kart power teams to Lola, Chip Ganassi and Newman Haas. The figuring, I guess, was if you want to win, you needed an advantage, and if everyone is running the same equipment, you will never have an advantage, right? I think at the same time, there was also a sentiment that Reynard perhaps had too many things going on to really focus on the Champ Car chassis, and Lola was more focused on karts, therefore hopefully leading to a better car in the end. At the same time, though, Penske did abandon their own cars that they had been building for years prior, and instead went with Reynard with some extra special seasoning applied. So it sort of equaled out, but only sorta. While the 2000 Reynard kart chassis was good enough with Penske to win the championship, with the 2 power teams in Chip Ganassi and Newman Haas switching sides to the Lola, and the Lola showing signs of improvement through 2000s, the rank would be more balanced between Reynard and Lola for 2001, even if Penske did end up winning in 2001 yet again. In the background for 2001, they'd also buy Riley and Scott, who had primarily built sports cars, had a bit of success here and there with their cars, dabbled a little bit in the Indy Racing League, kind of sort of there, but if nothing else, it was an expenditure that proved to come at the wrong time. With kart busy pointing itself at the ground at a rapid speed, Penske would defect to the IRL in 2002, leaving Reynard with basically no power teams for 2002. The economy was sort of up in the air coming out of the 90s and the good time rock and roll, and then of course there was 9/11, which everyone took a step back. Everything changed in 2001 and it doomed Reynard. Reynard was slow to gather that things were changing radically and were going to change very, very quickly during that late 2001 to 2002 season, with Penske leaving, basically meaning that there was no one really left besides the small teams that were still remaining with Reynard. And with all that put together, the car didn't sell very well. It wasn't supported very well because it didn't have all the engineering being thrown at it from all different sides. And basically the whole thing came down like a house of cards because the cash cow that made the whole operation work was no longer the cash cow. It was no longer bringing home the bacon. Yes, I realize that cows aren't bacon. So within a span of 8 years, they went from struggling to get back on their feet after failing to join Formula One to becoming a world-renowned manufacturer within karts as well as sports car programs, to bankruptcy. In 8 years, it happened that fast. Such is the way of building race cars. It's a very volatile market. But I will say there is one thing that they have left, and that is a lasting impression, because when you make cars as beautiful as those kart machines were, they will always be remembered forever and ever. Highly biased opinion, of course, but still, best looking wings and slicks cars ever. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.